Okay. Hi, good morning, everybody. My name's Charlene Webb. I'm a carrier from the Fort St. James area. I live and breathe in the Chimshan territory. We're located 3 kilometers northwest of Terrace in beautiful Chimshan territory. I belong to the First Nations Health Directors Association. Way back in 2013-14, I joined as part of the association. I would like to acknowledge the traditional territories that I am working on and living on is the Tsimshian territory. It's my husband's territory. And collectively, all of you representing the traditional lands that you sit on. I've been a health director going on, I'm going to say how old I am. Oh, well. 21 years now, 22, 20. What year is it? 20, 24, 23 years. OMG. I'm an active member with the First Nations Health Directors Association. I sit on a number of committees, work related, and my personal role in our cultural house groups as well. And I would like to, I will be co-chairing, but I'm going to turn my camera off. I'm going to be watching for hands and monitoring the chat for when you have questions. And if you have questions and something just pending, just get our attention anyway or throw it in chat. I have a question or take the lead from our host here. And welcome to everybody. It's going to be a fun hour and a half. You got your coffee, you got your water. If you need to step away, just give us just a little BRB, be right back. And so we can hopefully touch base with you if you have any questions in case they respond to any of your questions. So with that, I will hand it over to our host.
I think that's me. Hi, everyone. I'm going to pull up my slides. I checked and it was working. I'm hoping everyone can see that. There we go. Awesome. Thank you for having me again to your meeting. I really appreciate spending time with you. So I'm Unjali, and I am an uninvited occupier on Silks territory. And I'm in the role of medical officer of women's health at the First Nations Health Authority in the OCMO office. And I've held that role for almost 7 years. I'm just going to make sure this is working. Here we go. And I'm going to try to move that. There we go. I don't know if that'll go away. There we go. Some of you know a little bit about me, but in case you don't. So my parents were both born in northern India just before the partition of India and Pakistan and had to be relocated. So as children, my dad walked the partition line and saw deep atrocities, and it's definitely been very impactful in our family as far as intergenerational trauma. And then my mom's family they had a car, they were able to drive through the border and be relocated. My mom's family, it was 3 daughters at that time in India, but my grandpa decided that his 3 daughters should be educated. And so they were, and it's really changed the trajectory of our life. So when my parents met shortly after they left India, primarily for opportunity, because there are many siblings in the family, and it was sort of put forward that they would collectively support each other. And so when my parents left, they went to England and they had to leave due to abject racism, that they really couldn't find employment and they were 2 working doctors. And so they left. And when they came to Canada, again, it was really hard for my mom to find work because she's a colored doctor. And she was offered a position in Treaty 6 territory in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. And so my parents made a home there and were over time sort of adopted into our community. And they served for over 50 years. My mom delivered just over 13,000 babies. She was a primary care OB, and almost her entire practice was from our Cree and Dene communities. So a lot has happened in our life to sort of get me here today. But I grew up.
Hi, Charlene here. Not sure if you put yourself on mute.
Yeah, I can't hear you either, Anjali.
Anjali, we can't. Did you hit mute by mistake?
And my dad was the only pediatrician. My dad was doing a lot of the evacuations for most of the 3 provinces. So Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, and from our area. And then my mom was sort of the home base. So I kind of saw both growing up of what evacuation was like, as well as what it was like to receive care closer. And so it sort of grounded my experience in this work. Just thought I'd share. I know previously I've come and shared that, and I won't go into complete details because I know we've talked about some of this before, but we've had community members come forward who have wished to reclaim birthing. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about reclaiming birthing and so the work that's being done at the OCMO. And with that, what ended up happening was I co-founded the provincial working group with operational people in British Columbia, with all the health authorities and the ministry, to really create a table on this topic, because prior to this time, there wasn't a collection of the operational people together talking about reclamation of birth and, birthing sovereignty, and what does that look like in this province, and how do we ensure that this is moving forward. And so we came together in March 2023 for the first time, and then again in October. And between March and October, the group doubled. So there was so much interest in making change and system transformation, and there had never been sort of a place to land this work, that there was a lot of excitement, and it was really positive discussions going forward as far as how do we ensure that in each and every person's role within those people at this table, there could be movement forward. And then that, well, what's most appropriate is to create something that's representative of community, that isn't just this table of sort of healthcare folks and health authority folks and on the ground folks as well, but how do we ensure that we're representing community voice? And so since November 2023, I've been working and leading, with a lot of support, the creation of a story document that really shares sort of desires, needs, opportunities, and challenges within communities. And the goal is, of course, action to create change and system transformation. When we consider like the sort of wider picture, sort of nationally and provincially, we know that this is a topic of discussion countrywide. We know that there are ongoing webinars, conversations, collections, and it's really gained momentum in the last 2 years in particular, but it's of course time immemorial that this should have been happening. But there's been a lot more conversation in the last while. We've had more birthing centers in Canada arise. And a big part of that is been grounded in the fact that in Canada, there was no maternal mortality registry, and right now it's being created. And why that's so important is because the experience of birth and how we are really effectively creating safe birthing environments has not been delved into deep enough. And these are vital pieces of information for us to know, how do we make things better? And so that's definitely impacted what we're doing as far as, the attention that's being garnered to birthing, and what does that look like, and what's being asked for within communities. And so over the last months, we've had a really amazing period of time to speak to people throughout the province who have wished to share their birthing experiences, suggestions, thoughts, ideas, and as many people as we can to really hear what's needed, what's desired, and how do we really put that into the context of the transformations that we can make. And when we consider what has been happening throughout the country, I'll just go back to this. As many of you know, I had the opportunity to visit birthing centers in the spring of 2023. So I was able to go to 6 Nations and spend some time there, the Toronto and Ottawa birthing centers, and really see the difference in what has been available now for over 25 years in one province versus ours. I also grew up near Sturgeon Lake, where a birthing center is being developed, and really seeing how does that happen and what was community desiring and what did that look like. So it's been a lot of learning over this past year of like what would it look like in British Columbia, and what can we do to support in my role and in the people that we've been able to bring together who are so excited at this birthing table. So when I look at how we're putting the information together, so we are creating a document. The thing I can liken it the most clearly to would be to Sacred and Strong. I had the honor of being part of the creation of that document. I don't say this is in parallel, but the birthing version is to really share, what we're hoping to get to and what we want to highlight. I thought I'd pull up some of the topics that are being developed. So really sharing, and I've had the honor and privilege of speaking to several elders throughout the province whose grandparents were traditional midwives in communities, and were able to share the story of what that was like and really pass what that knowledge transfer was like, and then how that was disrupted and what does that look like. I've also had the opportunity to work on the back end of the system too, to say, what else has happened to take away, particularly birthing closer to home? So even if it's not in community birth, what has occurred? And we were able to access the maps of the last 20 years of the closures of maternity services in British Columbia, and have diagrammatic opportunities to share these. We're able to see that it's been very impactful, particularly for certain communities that are being evacuated quite far for their birth, where they weren't in 2009. And so really getting a feel for where and how and what are the services, what have they changed from and into, and where have been depleted, and what does that look like? Where did the system start to really change things dramatically over this last period of time? And it's really been very impacted by that. We also wanted to, for educational purposes, to many, but also to really raise the voice of the fact that birth is a community event, and that there are many people that are a part of birth in a journey of pregnancy. So inclusive of elders, liaisons, doulas, lactation consultants, postpartum supports, midwives, family physicians, obstetricians, NPs, nursing, and health directors. Everyone has a role within the healthcare system to ensure safe birthing, whether it's in community closer to home or away from home, and what does that look like in each of those pillars. Along the road, a lot of the discussion has really surrounded in community supports. Many people have come forward really hoping for expanded and upskilled supports within community, not necessarily birth itself, that's been absolutely desired, but a really strong desire and a voice of surrounding supports. And what that looks like is, of course, lactation supports and postpartum supports, but also prenatal supports of upskilling technical pieces like non-stress tests that could potentially be done in community. Ultrasounds that could be linked, because now we have so many virtual services to, potentially bring these services back to home and have it linked to other centers to be read and, managed collectively, that we do have these opportunities to sort of make those changes and system transforms. Another big one was the role of doulas. Doulas have been heard significantly as far as the loss of doulas and the need for in-community doulas and support, in the role of advocacy, in the role of not just having someone in community, but someone that can speak to another doula, or potentially liaison as well, could fill this role at times as well. But having that communication if it is an evacuation circumstance, but most importantly, having in-community doula growth has been brought forward repeatedly as far as the desire for, again, ensuring that from community by community is supported. So when someone wishes to be trained in doula programs, how do we ensure that training can be done at home? How can it be something that's supported at home? And how do we ensure that it's something that is stable and that can remain, instead of what we've had happen in many circumstances where there's a lack of sort of sustainability. We are speaking to folks that have developed programs as such, and trying to see how do we then support those programs and what does that look like go forward. Within the work as well, I wanted to ensure that we focused really sort of full circle on where we're at with the moms who need us the most, and the pregnant women and pregnant families who need us the most, pregnant people who need us the most. And that really comes down, again, sort of, we definitely in Canada lost track of where we're losing people in the maternal journey. And it can be not just a loss, but a morbidity situation. And how do we then support people better? And so within this work, doing a deep dive into stigma, its impact when someone who's pregnant is using substances, what supports are available and not available, and where, and a very clear picture of the lack of non-urban services, a very clear picture of, again, the need for doula support and liaison support to get people through this period of time, ensuring that people are able to access care in a safer way. So a really deep dive into that piece of work. Further to that, another piece of work that is a deeper dive is surrounding child apprehension and the ability for people to attend safely within a care system. And these, of course, are at times interrelated, these sort of deeper dive areas. How do we ensure that CFD is a part of the conversation, and how do we transform the system to ensure that moms are feeling safe, pregnant families are feeling safe, people are feeling safe within the system? And how do we potentially swing unsafe circumstances? Another big piece is on consent and coercion within the healthcare system, to again, consider how do we ensure that, pregnant families, pregnant people are receiving care that is not coercive, not just surrounding coerced sterilization, but coercive in general in the care pathway and journey. And then I know Jen Marie's on the call today, and Jen and I have had a few conversations, and thankful for you for that. But it's really surrounding birth outcomes. And so when we consider how many babies are being born early in First Nations families, and where, and what does that look like, and how do we, again, sway the system? So resoundingly in the work in the last, now going on 5 months, there has been a very strong desire to have birthing services closer to home, at times at home, at times closer to home, revisiting the maternity services that have closed over the last 20 years, or new models of care that are more appropriate to the community and the desires of community. Also the desire to have far more doula programs for community by community. Lactation consultants has, again, been a really big part of the conversation. More consultants in community, particularly related to if someone is being needed or desired evacuation for their birth, when they come back, what's that baton service? How do we ensure that people still have service along the road and at home? Assessments, as I mentioned, how do we ensure that, there's some potential upskilling in communities and the ability to work together between tertiary care and home communities, and what does that look like? And of course, standing particularly for the moms identified as needing this work the most, how do we ensure that there's anti-racist, anti-stigma care within maternity care, which has not necessarily been targeted in the past in such a direct fashion, and what does that look like? And we are working with tertiary care centers on that, and there are Indigenous departments that have now newly been formed in most circumstances, like in Vancouver and BC Women's Hospital, for example. We're working with Sherry Delalo's team quite closely. I wanted to share with you one of the maps that we have of closures throughout the province. So green means there are obstetrical services, and orange means that those services were closed between 2009 and now. So it's quite a number. And you can see there's many communities that have been impacted by the loss of service closer to home or at home. And what does that look like go forward as far as goals that we would have? Again, sort of the deeper dives, and we look at how intertwined that is within the sites that have been closed, and where we're seeing more losses, more morbidity, and more involvement of MCFD, more coercion from the system, and linking those two. We have had some great models that we've had brought forward and that we're aware of. FIR being a great program in BC Women's, particularly for moms or pregnant women and pregnant families, pregnant people that are using substances. That really does provide wraparound care, provides access to services in a really uniquely personalized fashion. And I think programs like that are ones that we can model after, but sadly, it's in an urban center where people would have to travel, and there's not very many beds. We have Harmony House in the north for similar services. However, again, very, very little service is available. Of course, we've had the Kwakwak Project on the North Island offering midwifery services closer to home. We've had people that have used the service that have taken part in this work so far, and have been really generous with their support and their words surrounding how their experience was. And it was generally a very positive experience, and offered a great deal of choice. And again, that wraparound service and care closer to home. And there was models outside of British Columbia that we continue to look at, particularly Six Nations. Six Nations is got a unique funding model where it's partly by the ministry, partly by the band, and it has a training program within it as well. So they have Indigenous midwives, but also a training program of Indigenous midwifery within their program, and that allows for apprenticeship model training to be really successful. It's different than what we necessarily have in British Columbia as far as regulations. However, again, looking forward to how do we transform the system to ensure that we're offering the best care. Grounding the work, particularly for our partners, on this being anti-racist care, anti-stigma care, and that wraparound supports, particularly surrounding social determinants, are met in maternity care. Some of the sort of possibilities that we'd like to look forward to would be, of course, increased services like FIR and Harmony House outside of urban centers. How do we ensure that we're supporting people where they're living, where they're at? We're not asking people to be transported out for every aspect of their care, and that we're ensuring that we are offering, sustainable in-community services whenever possible. And what does that look like? How do we move forward on the support of people who are using substances and are pregnant? How do we look at, expansion or replication of, midwifery services like the Kwak Project? How do we support that work go forward? Also, programs that have come forward to us that are offering curriculum-based community by community for community doula training, and how do we support that, and what does that look like? Again, the sort of upscaling for antenatal care and potentially postpartum care as well. What would that look like? In the document, I do have a section on the role of everybody, including the health directors, and you'll have access to this well before it is published in any way, but I took a stab from your website and from our conversations on sort of where health directors lie within the healthcare system and what that would look like as far as creating safe environments, knowing that this is our collective goal. So I know we have lots of time now to discuss, but I'll stop my slide share and maybe we can have a conversation about the big body of work that's occurring right now. And I'm open to all questions and comments and I welcome them. So I'll open the floor. So.
Hi, Charlene here. I've been checking chat and checking for hand raised. One, if the PowerPoint can be shared to the website on FNHDA, and we can grab it from there if that's possible. The one question I have is around a safe delivery, like the family members feeling safe when Ministry of Children and Family are involved. All too often we see ministry at the birth and not allowing that bonding time, that critical time after birth for some bonding to happen. How can we in community, because I stayed the heck away from child welfare, it's way over there in the field. Because my staff and I need to build a trust with our members so we don't get involved in apprehensions, removals, or investigations, right? But how can we support the parents and the grandparents and really send a message to Ministry of Children and Family, like to allow this critical time with mom and babe? Thank you.
Thanks, Charlene. Such an amazing point to bring up. Thank you so much for bringing that forward. So one of the biggest piece of work to come out of this work is just that. So we started it with, I have a relationship with BC Women's and we do ground rounds and we have the opportunity to use their platform of ground rounds to share information to all provincial reproductive health providers in BC. And so we did one, we've done many, but we did one on duty to report, duty to support. And it was in November, if I'm correct, November or December 2023. And it was our most highly attended grand rounds ever, not just of our collaborative rounds, but of all grand rounds that year. It was over 100 people that came to it. And what's great about that is it's a starting point for us to get the information out that this is a problem. People are scared. People are not accessing care, that people, when they do access care, are not safe. And it is absolutely related to discrimination and racism. There is absolutely this underlying that we know that the system needs to know and all people working in it. And so within the work that's being created now in this document that's being created, we do have a section especially for this, but it's really a launching pad for more work go forward. Again, surrounding provider education, of course, but importantly on system transformation and what does that look like? One of the protective factors that we know needs to be built up is advocacy that someone has with them in their care. So is there a more robust elders program within the hospital system to protect people and sit with people and be available to people? More doulas, more Indigenous liaisons, particularly surrounding birth, is sort of a specialized core group of people. And from what I feel and what I feel like has been told, all of the above are required. And so how do we ensure people are not isolated and alone in these circumstances? And that there isn't this power differential of having MCFD without having one's support people with them. Another big part is, of course, bringing birth closer and at home. So depending on what the community desires and what that would look like. But when we look at the map of all of these centers that have closed, that means that those people are being removed from community to deliver even further away whenever that occurs. So how do we now repatriate services back? Because then it comes back down to that conversation around upskilling. But then we can allow people from community to become part of the birthing community and build a system of change where people from community are part of that workforce and that healthcare system that is closer to home. And so that's sort of the big picture of where that would be. But starting like right at the roots of today, lots of education and really starting that interface conversation very clearly with MCFD about what's going on and what healthcare can do about it to change it. So.
I like the comment that you made there, duty to report and duty to support. So looking at some of the First Nations communities where they're very active in the birthing process and allowing the father clan to be present in the room when the baby's being born. I see the doors are opening for that, but the hiccup that we run into is if the mother's under the eyes of MCFD, and then the hospital staff said, there's too many of you, you need to go away. So the priority should be the father clan and MCFD go home. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I love that duty to support. If that can be something that I'm just going on a limb here, and like all us health directors have that, so we can promote to our families who have MCFD in their lives that, trust your doctor, trust your midwives, trust this is what. So if that's something that a statement that you can share with us, we would greatly appreciate it, and share it with the families, and most specifically the prenatal moms. So a couple of questions. Well, your presentation was my staff had this conversation around the opportunity for doula course. Doula was coming up, and because we're so rural, we're like an 8-minute drive from the hospital. None of the staff were willing to, but they shared also the scared. I'm scared to be there when they deliver. What if something goes wrong and comes down to liability? So is that something that we can gauge this conversation over to around liability? And thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up as well. One, I'm not going to take credit for duty to support, duty to report. Tony Wintroff created that statement, and she is who, like, I had the platform for rounds, but Tony took it from there on that particular event. And she, myself, and Denise Lisser will be working together on a really fulfillment body of work surrounding duties to support. So more to come. I'll come back and we'll talk more about it. The liability piece it weighs on everyone, including me. When we consider, that, the system was really, it did this, it created that fear for us as well, that, there were midwives in every community, there were doulas in every family, and that was how life was. And then when we had field matrons come in and start to remove people from community or take over what was occurring in community, we lost a comfort level with having birthing anywhere near home. Now, that's not going to change overnight, but what we can do is support each other, particularly as healthcare providers, and say, how do we make sure that we're creating programming and education that allows people to feel confident in the role that they feel comfortable taking on? And there are many times that maybe a doula isn't the particularly right role for someone, but a liaison is. And how do we create systems where someone finds the right role, particularly in community, by community, for community? Also ensuring that we know that if a community is not set up for a birth and potentially doesn't necessarily want to move in that direction of having births in a community, if there's an emergency birth, is the community ready? Are the healthcare workers ready? And what does that look like? And that is also on the radar of what does it look like to ensure that people are ready? And a lot of that comes down to nursing, of course, because usually our communities are served by nursing. And I've had a lot of conversations about nursing with nursing surrounding what is that role, what does that look like, and what could that be? And it's very much surrounding, emergency management within health professionals' role. When we look at, bringing birth back to home and bringing birth closer to home, it's really by community and for community. So if a community wants this and wants to develop programming, their system should be supporting that. If there's potentially not enough births or it's very hard to evacuate out of and closer to home is a better option, then that's great too. That should be supported. Or if it's a community that says, you know what, I want all my birthers and I want to be a birther who leaves, that should also be supported. But all of those conversations need to be happening, and they weren't, not effectively at the right tables with the right people, and now they are. And so I think that that's the first piece of progress that we've had happen. And there are communities that want to reclaim birthing in a really good way. And when we look at something like the Kwak Project, or we have other communities that have been very clear that we want birthing back at home, it's with skilled professionals. It's with skilled people who have the knowledge and ability to take it on and wouldn't be, providing fear to a community. It would be truly in a systemic supported way. So, and it can offer just a multitude of positives. So when we talk about MCFD, for example, more than likely we'd have in-community support by community during the delivery time, closer to home by someone who knows community and understands the workings of community, which I think is a critical piece when we talk about pieces like MCFD. So I hope that's helpful.
Is anybody? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Cindy.
Yeah, sorry. I just I like the comment you said, but I'd also like to see it kind of really, really actually done about conversations at the right table with the right people. Because, I think aside from this type of discussion we're having about this type of um healthcare need, being healthcare ready, I think one of the things that I'm noticing returning, I just returned from being away from this job for 6 years, and uh, I still see a struggle coordinating in this area um, for different healthcare needs. And I like that comment, and I'm wondering, if there's actual agreement of some sort for communities about this discussion. Because it's just like right now, just discussion for me and dialogue. Where is the agreement? Like I said, I've been out of here for 6 years. So.
Thanks, Cindy. So I'll be honest, there's a lot of feelings in this work. And I think that's important. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. And I think it's important to have all those feelings out. And so when we talk about the agreement, I think the number one agreement that I think I can resoundingly share is that every community should have the choice of what they would like to see happen. Is it bringing birth back to community with skills within community that are right for them at the right time in the right place? Is it the repatriation of centers that have closed, that are closer to home, that offer more higher level services and have maternity within a hospital that is now no longer there, or things like that? And is it right for a community to have their baby further away in a really high level center. That should also be okay. So in my mind, there's these sort of three pillars of at home, closer to home, and away from home that I sort of stick to. And I think that choice and that ability to do what's right for each community, I think, is the most appropriate response that I can give you. That I don't think we should all have to agree. I don't think we should have to agree on what's going to happen in each community, because it depends on the community. But it should be a discussion and it should be supported. So I think that that's where things are turning here, and that I'm really hoping for that change. And when we create this sort of document that's coming soon, a lot of it is that, like, let's just hear those feelings. Let's hear the thoughts and ideas and feelings and what people are looking for. And it's different. Like, there's a lot of diversity within those, and that's good. That's a good thing for us to bring forward, because every community should have a unique response to a much needed change. So I hope that helps. I hope that answers it.
That does answer my question. I just think that it's really hard because it took me a long time to get, what all these students were saying in school and and often sometimes where I'm from, where our health centers located is in a really remote place that has no ambulance service, no physician services, and only nursing station amenities. And a lot of times nurses come into Kitasoo face and they think that their skills are gonna land them a great experience. And meanwhile, the emergency nursing they came from, they're equipped with what they are fully equipped with all of the equipment and amenities that's required of them to be that emergency nurse. And they come to a place like Kitasoo and they don't have that equipment, and then they're kind of, bunked a little bit. And for the years that I've been here prior, we have always been told this is the way it is and this is the way it rolls. And so it's kind of like, I like the autonomy of people having a decision on how they want birthing, because at the end of the day, I was just like, what are we doing here? Um, because I think a lot of people have adapted to the system as well. And um, I like the autonomy they get to choose closer to home, or however you're um gonna roll this out. It looks really nice, and it made me think about my dad taking me to where my granny was born. She was born in near an estuary, not in a hospital. He's rubbing it in because he said I take a hospital for granted too much, and showed me actually where she was born. So it was really spiritual for me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, Charlene here. While you were sharing there, I had this aha moment, and I think this is more for the health directors in the room here. Is it possible we can build a relationship between your center and our center, because we're so close to the Terrace Hospital, for example, that if your prenatal is being shipped here, we can support the prenatal and like give a care package, do a wellness check, make sure they're getting to the hospital, just to support each other when a crisis like that happens. Like, and God forbid that, like, I'm thinking ahead here, forest fires. Where are you going to send your prenatals?
Mhm.
And who's going to do the wellness checks on them? And it's a balancing act. In my mind, it's a balancing act, especially if you have somebody with a very high pregnancy and their gestational diabetes. They're the ones that can be priority to send out, right? So it will be, to me, it will be an amazing opportunity to work with your center and utilize the staff I have here to do some wellness checks on the pre and or postnatal, right? And the reason I had this aha moment, my niece has a special needs child. He has Down syndrome, and he had open heart surgery, and they're from the north here, and the timing was just. He was sent to Vancouver for the open heart surgery, but then they were sending him home to where our town, where my home community was evacuated because of the forest fire. So we're like, oh my God, we got to get a place. We need to make sure there's air purifiers for baby, because he's recovering from open heart surgery. So see, because of that incident, I just reached out to whoever I could, check on her, drop her off this, try to keep her and babe safe, right? So to me, building a relationship with the health directors in the northwest, if your pre and postnatals are being transferred to the Terrace Mills Memorial Hospital, by all means, reach out to us to how we can support. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlene. Because one of the focuses that I've maintained in this work is collaboration. Like, how do we come together? Because it has been very clear to me, and I think many others, that hasn't occurred when it comes to birthing. And we saw an amazing example when COVID hit, where everyone came together, every single system came together and got on the same page for the most part, and ensured unique services were offered, community specific services were offered, transport was part of the conversation. The system found a way to find each other. And in birthing, I feel like this is our moment as well for that to occur, that this is that time period when we can collectively come together and say at a table, that's not right for my community. We want something else. That's good. That's fantastic. How do we support each other in that? What do you need from other system partners to support that reality? And what does that look like? So I think that stepping back from this, it's always, how do we work better together? So and communication pathways between each other is of vital importance in that, Charlene. Thank you.
So I don't mean to, you guys ask some questions. You started off your presentation with your parents and their journey to how they got to where they are, right? Stories like this really triggers a lot of memory. And Cindy shared a bit of a piece of about her grandmother and mother, and I can't help but think to how we can face the world with challenges and still come up, be creative and innovative to get where you are, to look at you, and that those success stories, stuff like this, stories like this, like what with Cindy being so trusting with us and sharing with that. I think having these stories and these journeys to our youth, to give them some hope that, hey, just because I don't come from a rich family, or that I can't do what you're doing, right? So having these, to me, I'm thinking like maybe it's a task, Kim, I'm going to look at you with FNHDA, if we could create like a film and just capture these stories, like the challenges your parents had, and what, when they came to Canada, where did they go, and then how midwives the doors were starting to open. So stuff like this, make a quick video, and we could share it, load it on the FNHD site, and then we can go in and grab it and share it with our youth. One, for Planned Parenthood; two, for planned education goals; and three, really just show them that, yes, life's a challenge. But what you make the best of it, right? And sharing that story, because I just loved how you started the intro to where you came from, and the challenges and what your parents did to do them, to get where they are and to support where you are. These are success stories that we need to share with our youth. And more so, I'd like to target the young ladies. If there's a possible way we can, I go back to my niece who has a special needs child. There was no material. She came forward to us in her pregnancy that they've been informed that baby's Down syndrome. There was, like, I have my early childhood education. I worked in daycares and years ago. Damn, I'm old. Anyway, so I had no video or no material that I could have shared with the parents to how to care for a child with special needs and the grandparents. So this is why, like, I think of the success stories with you sharing how you came here, and then follow that a gentle way into a conversation to talk about Down syndrome or cerebral palsy, or because this is life-changing news the parents are hearing, and the chances are it happens in a doctor's office where there's no family support. So if that's something that we could look at doing, maybe a project that we could work on, and with the support of FNHDA Shared Secretariat, we can upload that to their site and we can pull it off. Because that teachings around how to care for a child even with a cleft lip, what does that look like, right? And if we're able to share this, capture the young people, it's not to scare them. This is our world. This is what we're facing. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. It's so true, Charlene. I think it's so important for us to share that piece that we often don't necessarily share all of the successes. Like I was born with an autoimmune condition that could have like derailed my entire life. And instead, after all my parents had been through that, no, it was just one more thing that we're going to get past. And so I think those conversations are so important to say what your circumstances doesn't define your future. Like it's so important. And I think that really, when we think of the world of birthing, for example, and we're saying, how do we grow services in communities and how do we build confidence in communities? By sharing stories that it works, like sharing stories that, life can transpire into something really positive despite, whatever has occurred. So I think, absolutely, I think that's a phenomenal idea. So thank you.
There's so the other piece that what the question I asked about, like how we bring them closer to home, how can we in community do capacity building to support the prenatals, and if they want to have that choice for a home birth or having a midwife in the delivery room with them, how can we, in our area, just look at North is so mass here, is there a master list that we can look at to pull some resources off of?
Not yet, but coming soon.
Okay.
To a degree. So the first step is completing this body of work by sort of in the next couple of months, to really share sort of what the possibilities are, what's desired, what does it look like, and then bringing the people together to offer those services, to say, where do you fit here and what does that look like? And so I'm going to come back to you with more answers after that period of time has occurred and once we've been able to have those conversations. But the goal would be that, yes, like when resources are needed, who do you call and what does that look like? And there's a degree of regionalization with that work that needs to occur. And so give me a moment and we'll get there together. So yes. And you're not the first person to ask for it too.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, that's good to hear. Right now, like in Terrace, if yes, we're the hub for the Northwest area, from the Tahltans to Niska to Haisla and some of the Gitxsan area. But when it comes to those specialized services, the BC Women's Hospital, children are sent to BC Women's Children Hospital. Just wondering, especially when you have a child being sent down, what kind of resources and or support that we can look at, especially for traumatic birth, for the mom, and because there's no family supports, right? And not everybody, I think I speak on behalf of the whole province, we don't want Ministry of Children and Family there, and that, you know, they're the first ones to step up and say, oh, I got mental health support, or I got a family preservation worker, and we want to be so far away from them, right? Especially with a traumatic birth, right? Mm-hmm. So how can we, what can we look at, and what supports can we tap into when it comes to BC Children's?
Mm-hmm. Great question. So we're working really closely with BC Women's and BC Children's, because of the fact that the sickest come there and are often frequently coming or staying great durations. And so what has happened in the last year that I think is really commendable change has been there's the COO of Women's has really supported the creation of a growing and large Indigenous health team. So it's led by Dawn Tisdale and Sherry DeLallo, and it's growing. And we have had the opportunity, so myself and the Matt Child teams at FNHA, to work really closely with them to ensure that things that are coming forward to us are being met there. But they're also doing a tremendous amount of engagement, and just knowing like they're pretty new, but they've still like laid really strong, solid plans, and are now spending this year doing a tremendous amount of engagement to know what needs to change in our facility. They've also created an anti-racism steering committee that I also sit on, but that has a really strong base of providers and administrators to take part in what needs to change within this facility. How do we make sure acute care is a safe place to be? And that's where that change is going to occur for sure. So I think that link, connection, and collaboration, and that growing team, I think full of curiosity, wonder, expertise, and skill are a very positive move forward towards that change that we'll continue to work with. So.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here on the call that has some questions they would like to throw out to her, and or suggestions? We're here for another 40 minutes, ladies.
I do have a question about, you know, everybody's so dead set against MCFD. I understand why. But, you know, when you're in the neck of the woods like myself, where I just have nobody to help me when I'm in a crisis with children, and I know from my head and my heart that I have no safe place to put a child. What are your alternatives, and what have you done in your communities in cases like that? Because obviously you must have resources. Why, uh, you know, use for example, Kitasoo. Back in the day when I was fully full-time here, I used to manage the probations, you know, because if people are dealing with the Canadian justice system for their children or for, you know, domestic violence, I have nobody to help me with that in community. And so we kind of like, lack of a better word, I'd be like tired of my people needing resources, going to a main office and saying, I don't know, from people, I don't know, I don't know. And then sometimes from my own experience, you know, sometimes I don't sit here and say I believe that kids won't be in care ever. I want to see our communities grow better than they have, but you've got to consider the health of people too. Like I have to go into that mind development of, you know, like thinking about all of these discriminations they face with stigma of alcoholism. And, you know, when you use alcohol, it delays our development. And then there's no growth spurt for people why they're in addiction. And could be emotional delays. You know, there's just these when you look at it from a developmental lens and look at how things happen, why we're in this stage of stigma and you know, a lot of children in care. Of course, I don't want to see them in care. I want them to be taken care of by community, but I just find that it's really hard. Like I don't like MCFD in a manner that, you know, they have the formulas they have to follow. Because then back in the day, they'd ask me, "Can you help me coordinate a meeting with the family, we coordinate a meeting and I sit there with them and write out their so-called safety plan. And then boom, as soon as they get the information from me, they close the door on me. I'm not allowed to talk to them unless the parents give permission. And I'm just like, there's no continuity there. And so I'm not saying that I'm for them or against them. I think that community is, the picture is bigger with community. Like, we're cleaning up the aftermath of colonization. And you look at the way, the system is run. I said, where we thought that all these old, I mean, excuse me, but all of these, I'll call them the old sleeping giants, all those men back in the day that said, we want to change health. We're going to vote for health. The majority of them were chief and council were men long time ago. And I'm like, you're being reactive, because we're already suffering trying to figure out, is it my call to say, oh, we're going to go with this pedagogy of education? No. And it took me a long time to realize that, like, we think we're going to change from Health Canada to a First Nations Health Authority, and meanwhile, we're operating with the same kind of educational pedagogy that Health Canada operated with. So I had a really hard time because my community, we had no justice services, no justice agency to help people integrating back into their family or community. We had no child jurisdiction to manage our own uh, um, problems that come up from whether it's alcoholism or abuse or why children have to be put in a safe place. Realistically, when you look at our history, the way we managed, these kinds of problems is probably a little bit more barbaric when I think about it. But at the same time, I didn't like going to put children on that airplane to ship them out of Clem 2 because I knew I had nobody safe to place them with either. And I'm not sitting here saying I'm for MCFD, but how do we come up with a plan for that type of pillar, if you want to call it, when we're managing this one area of the discussion here today, when we don't really have a clear path of what we're doing with that system. And even though they're having this whole conversation around it, it's still tough to move uh community forward to understanding that we have to implement our wellness strategies aligned with our health plan that we could give to FNHA to get their funding. It's really hard to mobilize that when you're living amongst uh all of these problems that occur from the trauma. Um, and it's going to take a long time, but again, I want to reiterate that I've learned the hard way. I used to think when I was a little younger, just create services and then you got to use them. And no, it's really allowing that woman and family to have the autonomy of what they want to use. But again, with me as an administrator, you promised me the world that you're going to give Clem 2 this, and this, and then at the end of the day, oh, this nurse doesn't want to go to Clem 2, and then I have to live with how it is. Oh, we don't want your blood work here right now. Your blood work has to go somewhere else, and I have to live with the way it is. That's why I'm fixated around agreement, and because it just doesn't sit well with me, and I'm just sitting there like going into my judgment vibe and saying, okay, there's a bunch of expensive people working in this place now with expensive overhead of people and limited resources to community, and at the same time, trying to juggle uh care for a community and not just mothers has been a struggle because we've been told in our neck of the woods this is the way it is, and we live in a proximity that's we're very far away from services that might be required for emergency situations. So I think that's all I'll say for now. And thank you for the presentation. And I like what you said about, wrapping up this discussion before we go into what Charlene asked for the master list. So that's really good because when we were told we're going to have an urban strategy and then we still don't have it, then there's kind of trust issues that grow, you know. So I really like what you said. Your master plan's coming later after we discuss this area. Thank you.
One step at a time. Cindy, you really hit a few things that I think are so vital. One is MCFD is not leaving, then at times are required, unquestionably, but that's where that conversation of duty to support comes in. And so how do we ensure that their role, not us changing necessarily, but the role of MCFD and their interface with us is different? And so how do we ensure that instead of sort of this withdrawing of children, and at times not, and it's not always the case, in every case is going to be unique and different, but at times it is solely based on racism. It's not necessarily based on, needs, and distinguishing the two effectively and ensuring that if it has to happen, what is the system doing to support the family and how this occurred and what occurred and what the family needs, wants, desires go forward. So conversations like, I think a good example would be, a pregnant person who's using substances. And, right away, MCFD is going to be a big part of the conversation of where the baby's going to be after the baby's born. And in many cases, it is going to be required that the baby needs to be removed. But is the family being supported in that removal? Are they being even counseled? Is there even, trauma-based care being provided to them? And what does that look like? And say that isn't the requirement. And in fact, this person needed housing and they needed supportive services and things along that line. And things that in urban centers, they've created programs. How do we ensure that maybe not in your particular community, but closer to you, something like that can start to exist? So it's sort of finding those pieces of like, how do we just do it better? Like, how do we ensure that it's a more respectful system of people's needs and desires? Because I certainly would not want to come in and promise the world, because first of all, let's finish the document. Let's finish where we're at, like in one stage at a time and one step at a time. But more importantly, to not break promises and to not to promise things that just wouldn't work in a community, but instead what does work and what's needed. Is it closer versus in? Is it in? Is it possible? Are we going to be depleting resources from somewhere else to create that? And then what does that look like? And so a great example would be, Charlene, the master list. Well, we know where everyone works right now, but how do we ensure that we're not taking someone from one region to plant them somewhere else and then depleting another region? And what does that look like? And so how do we build versus sort of just try to move pieces around and band-aid things? And so there's some longevity in the work, and I'm grateful for you coming along with me on it, because it's a long road and it's many hands, and I think there just has to be like I think a stepwise approach that's really considerate of desires, needs, voices, and all the feelings that come to this work. So, which are all valuable.
Hi, Cindy. Thank you.
Sorry, when you also discuss, I'm sorry to
okay.
talk there, but I think that discuss proximity closer to home, that's what we're dealing with right now, because not to sit here and feel like I'm airing out dirty laundry, but when we were told, like when I was still here back in 2016, all of a sudden we were told by a hospital close to us that's on Indigenous territory and told, your blood can't come here anymore. Your blood can't spin here anymore. And then it told you guys need your own hospital. I'm like, okay, we're teaching non-Indigenous people to be culturally safe to us. How are we culturally safe to each other? And then I felt like a big old liar, because I said, okay, I don't want to start this little tribal warfare. So I'm gonna tell my people back then, um, you just have to come back to the clinic to do your blood work again. Um, because there's no understanding, like let's let the anger sleep and let's get the service here. Um, and so I didn't tell people, oh, they didn't want our blood there. I said, then you just have to come back to the clinic and redo your blood. So I even went as far as ordering a piccolo machine. And then I get the flack from FNHA saying, well, there's ethical stuff around there. Then you have to train people. I said, I know. I said, I'm going to fly a lady in to calibrate the machine. And because I have a feeling that if we try to ship our blood to Vancouver, it's gonna spoil and then they're back again. So I'm like betraying my people by not telling the truth of what happened to the blood. Then it came up on our interview. So I said, let's go do a learning or wellness strategy aside from my health plan. And then when we did the health plan first, people were complaining because tell the nurses to stop losing their blood and tell the nurses to stop spoiling their blood. Meanwhile, that's on me because I didn't tell them the truth, why it spoiled. And it looks like a reflection on the nurses, but at the same time, I'm trying to coordinate things up here and I get stopped by FNHA. I tried to do a diabetes project with a cardiologist, and they said, if you want to do this project, you hire uh, our nurse when she's on her time off. And I said, how is this community-driven nation-based? They said, all this lip service. I said, so why I'm so highly critical of them using the same pedagogy, having expensive overhead of people, in the ivory tower, and then us here having limited services because we don't have adequate funding for those services. So it sounds so peachy to say having more resources closer to home when I'm already struggling to use those resources closer to home. So I think that needs to be kind of recognized and looked at as well. Like I don't want to come across a bunch of people in that system saying this is a Clemto problem. This is not a us problem, because right now, since 2014, we're still dealing with the same problem where it hasn't been rectified by nobody. And so now I'm calling the hereditary chiefs. I went to a lady in the community. I said, this is what happened. And um, what do I do? I said, because I said, and then she said, you go talk to so and so, and then they're gonna need to call some kind of healing ceremony between the nations.
Mhm.
And I said, we did that a long time ago, and that it's just like it just reminds me of the partnership accord with Vancouver Coastal Health, FNHA, and us as First Nations. I said it's just a piece of paper that's there collecting dust. It doesn't seem active, and I seem so negative, but it's a reality that I need to bring up so that we don't go there with this process. So thank you for your work, and I'll cap it right
No, it's perfect, Cindy. It's so true.
Yeah.
Like even when we look at, birthing itself, we just isolated that conversation. It's not that there's not services surrounding communities. It's how do we ensure that those services are able to be accessed, and what does that look like? And so you're absolutely correct that, of course, that has to be looked at. It has to be raised that what are we underutilizing in our system, why and how do we make those connections? And again, comes down to collaboration. So not always so the rebuild or the sort of extensive build of something that once was or could be versus working within what already exists. I hear you, and I thank you for bringing that forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy. It's good to hear the struggles in isolated communities to the challenges you are facing. The one question you asked about, yes, I do see some good with MCFD. I do see there are some kids that need to be placed in care to support the family. So what I look at, when I worked with some of the isolated and some semi-isolated communities here in the north, what I did was I partnershiped with the friendship centers. and or health centers that were closer to the hospital or closer to the next community to see what they have support, so that if my member's being transferred there, can somebody check on them? Can so that's a partnership building is something you can look at with depending on where the prenatals are being shipped to, connect with the health centers, see if they can do some wellness checks with the pre and postnatal, and it's I'm truly sorry to hear the struggles between FNHA and the support services you need at home. And by all means, reach out to me. I can help advocate for what your wishes are and what services look like for your community, and how you get it there should be your priority. Nation-based, community-driven. Directive number one is where you have the strongest voice, Cindy. Thank you.
Cindy.
Yeah, it's not that easy to coordinate, with a friendship center or because again, that's not within our proximity of service. We're not Northern Health here, so we don't go towards that area. And then also all of the friendship centers that might be associated with this area are all in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland. So, and then when you try to partner up with these other agencies, again, that's where the agreement falls apart. Let's say we have a service that is out of the next First Nations community, but then, they're like, let's say they're the host agency because I don't have somebody uh particularly licensed or other for that particular funding, and then they say to me, okay, let's go use this society here in such and such territory. And meanwhile, I they say, well, so and so doesn't want to go to Clam 2. And then I'm kind of tied because that partnership, there's nobody to ensure that it is going to be adequate or it's going to be followed. And we just get told this is just the way it is. So that's a difference between being so close in proximity to the nearest provider versus, the health system of FNHA and VCHA trying to put us into a teamlet model. It doesn't always work, and that's what they've done with us with MCFD. Our services for MCFD comes out of Bella Coola. All of the programming MCFD should provide for prevention doesn't even happen here because of the proximity issue. They only come in here in crises. So I I I see the Clem2 is slowly moving towards trying, like, I guess, working with parents to integrate their family back together, because we do have a young person here working with the family. I've seen her in action, um, and she's fabulous. But I think that at the same time, when we lack our own training around this developmental delay, whether it's associated with alcohol use or drugging, it's really hard for us to be mindful of that when we're in that realm of active uh, consultation with the parents, because my brain automatically goes and looking at, we're enabling that person. We're basically saying to them, could you confirm with me today your availability based on your use? And and part of my brain is like, okay, this is where I got to be cognizant of a developmental delay and rather just come in judgment mode. So it really is such a delicate process. And but I do have to say that share that with for the record. Like I've been this has been the life of Clem 2, is trying to have these partnerships where we get service, but we're always shortchanged. Always. And it's really hard for me to look at good things around this place when working together, community driven, nation based, when we're always told this is the way it's going to be. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Cindy. I appreciate that. And I think it I've got 11:20 on one clock and 11:10 on another clock here. So I'll turn to Kim to see where if we want to be excused a little early. Your call, Kim, if anybody doesn't have, and anybody else doesn't have any questions. Thanks,
Thanks,
Kim.
Charlene. For the record, we have no way of forcing you all to stay on. So and we have yet to be yelled at for giving you back 10 minutes of your time. Just looking, I see that there's been some sharing in the chat. Jennifer Murray has shared some information about a preterm birth study. And so there's a link there to some work that's happening in Cowichan Tribes territory. And I also wanted to acknowledge, and I really apologize because you're showing up for us as maternal child health, but I believe you're from Gitxsan territory, and just acknowledging that one of the other complications that I think we have talked about here is just highlighted, you know, sort of the reality mirroring the conversation. So it looks like there is a logging truck that's hit a bridge. And so Kispiox and Glenvowel are, you know, without a nurse today, because this is what happens. As we know, we have other communities. Cindy, I'm sure you have situations where someone's trying to come in by boat and it's a gale force wind. And so that's what happens. But we also know that babies, I have two kids myself, and I have to say that I would even maybe go a little further than they don't always choose the most convenient time. I feel like sometimes they maybe choose the least convenient time. I always kind of say when people go, oh, here's my due date, I'm like, well, now you know what day your baby is not going to be born. So yeah, these are those things. So I just wanted to, I don't necessarily see that there's a question in there, but just acknowledging that we do know that we can do all the great work to move services closer to or to home, and logging trucks and weather and all of that kind of stuff can still interfere with our plans. So just wanting to acknowledge all of that. But yeah, go ahead, Unjali. Yeah, go ahead.
Just acknowledging that the hope is things are better than they are now. So I come from a rural community, and I understand it's not remote, but I do understand a lot of the circumstances that surround, particularly having a mother who is an obstetrician, what can happen and how challenging it can be. But I do feel, and I'm an eternal optimist, I do feel that things can be better than what they are now. I feel like whatever that birthing experience is, you know, there have to be bigger conversations surrounding stigma, surrounding racism, surrounding safe care for families using substances, for pregnant people using substances, for preterm birth, for the use of medications appropriately, for having culture surrounding ceremony and babies and what is occurring, and more support if someone's being evacuated or however their journey is. So I think there are pieces here. So I don't want to come in sort of overwhelming the conversation with sort of big dreams and big ideas. And I just think it could be better. And there's many ways that it could be that I actually think could happen. So just to leave it with that. So.
That's a much better bow to tie things up in. Absolutely. But yeah, other than that, I don't see any other hands raised or people unmuted ready to talk, but very welcome to have you in there. So yeah, other than that, just to say that we do record our sessions, and then we do, I personally do not have the skills to load these things onto the website, but I do have the skill to forward them to people who do. So we'll get it up there as quickly as we can. And the FNHDA website has a great webinar library. I think that Dr. Malhotra is up there already from a couple of years ago. So feel very welcome to go and browse our webinar library any old time. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, everybody. And to FNHDA, thank you for the opportunity to help chair this amazing work. It's just aligned with how my week has been going. So it's definitely giving me some more ideas to how to support our First Nations people, no matter where they live, when it comes to birthing, and what can we do in our community to help, being so close to Mills Memorial Hospital. So thank you, everybody. Thank you. It's been a good week so far, and it's only day 2 technically. All right, but I'm gonna have to sign off now. I have another meeting I need to jump on. Kimberly, thank you for everything, and Doctor, I appreciate the work you're doing. Keep going, girl.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you guys. I'm gonna head off to another meeting too. Take care.
Thank you.